I remember the exact moment my father told me I was no longer welcome in his house. It was Christmas Eve. Not the kind filled with soft carols, cocoa, and love. Number ours was a house draped in tension, where even the blinking lights on the outdated tree looked exhausted from trying too hard. That night, my father didn't wrap presents or offer kind words. He pointed a shaking finger at me across the dinner table and said, "You're a burden, Rachel. Get out." I was 24, employed full-time, the one who'd paid the electricity bill that powered the oven he had used to roast that dry, flavorless ham, the same one I'd paid for. And yet, in the most festive moment of the year, in front of my mother and my 17-year-old brother Noah, he cast me out like a broken ornament. Let me rewind a little. I wasn't living in some luxurious downtown condo or hopping between weekend getaways. I worked as a billing coordinator at a modest healthcare clinic in Portland, Oregon. Nothing fancy, but it paid. Enough for food, for internet, for water, for gas. Enough to keep the heater running through winters that had grown crueler each year. We lived on the edge of the city, an aging neighborhood trying to hold on to its charm, a place where chipped paint told stories and silence echoed like a scream. My father had lost his job 3 years earlier. My mother worked part-time at a pharmacy but barely brought home more than a sigh. Noah was still in school, and I stayed. Not because I couldn't leave, but because they couldn't survive without me. I thought they knew that. But that night, under flickering lights and forced smiles, everything I had believed shattered. I came home from my shift, my coat still damp from the rain, the scent of hospital-grade sanitizer clinking to my skin. Mom was setting the table. Dad sat at the head, wineglass in hand, staring at nothing. Noah tried to catch my eye, a weak smile barely lifting the corners of his mouth. Dinner began like a funeral, quiet, awkward. The only sound came from silverware tapping gently against porcelain. I scooped some mashed potatoes, turned to say something, anything, to ease the silence. And that's when Dad slammed his hand down. "You're a burden." I didn't hear it wrong. His voice was steady, sharp, final. Mom let out a nervous laugh like she was trying to defuse a bomb with a joke. "Don't be ridiculous," she mumbled, not even looking at me. But Dad didn't blink. He leaned forward. "This is my house, and I say it's time you moved out." It was as if the floor cracked beneath me, my breath caught, my fork froze midair. Noah's face drained of color. "What?" I finally whispered. "You heard me," he said. "You've overstayed your welcome." I looked at my mother. Her head dropped. She didn't speak. Maybe she agreed. Maybe she just didn't care anymore. Noah dropped his fork, voice cracking. "If she leaves, how are you going to pay for anything? She's the reason we're not living in the dark." Dad didn't answer. And that's when I knew I wasn't family to them. I was function. I was a credit card in human form. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up and walked away from the table. Every step toward my room felt like a quiet rebellion, like I was peeling off years of obligation with every footfall. Inside my room, I opened my closet. My suitcase was still under the bed, untouched since college. As I unzipped it, I felt nothing. Not rage, not sadness, just a heavy, suffocating numbness. Then a soft knock. "Rachel?" It was Noah. "Did you lock the door?" I opened it. He stepped in, his eyes red but dry. He didn't cry, not in front of me. "You're really leaving?" I nodded. They said it, and I'm not going to beg to stay somewhere I'm not wanted. He looked down. "What happens now? The bills? The food?" "They'll figure it out," I said, though we both knew they wouldn't. He sat on the bed, staring at the wall like it might give him answers. "They don't deserve you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "That doesn't matter now. You still have time, Noah. Don't let them drag you under. When you're ready, I'll be here." He nodded slowly. A promise made in silence. I packed everything that night. Every hoodie, every receipt, every token of my invisible labor. My fingers trembled not with fear, but with the weight of realization. I had stayed too long hoping they would see me. Before midnight, I pulled out my phone and began logging into accounts, utilities, internet, streaming services. I removed my information from all of them. No explanations, no farewells. Just quiet, irreversible action. I was done funding a house that had no space for me. The next morning, as frost clung to car windows and the sun rose like it was too tired to try, I walked out with my suitcase. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. The TV buzzed inside, a holiday special still playing like nothing had happened. I didn't even turn around as I shut the door for the last time. I wasn't walking away from a home. I was escaping a cage. If this story already has your heart racing, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more real, raw, and powerful stories that deserve to be told. Now, here's a quick question just for you, the listener. If you were in Rachel's place, would you have A. Stayed quiet and endured the disrespect for the sake of family? B. Walked away, even if it meant starting over from nothing? Comment your answer below, type A or B, and tell us why you chose it. Your voice matters more than you know. And now, let's continue with the story. Because what happened after Rachel left wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The morning after I left, the world felt both heavier and strangely still. There was no farewell, no lingering look from a doorway, no last-minute change of heart. I walked out of that house with a suitcase and the weight of 4 years of silent sacrifice dragging behind me like a shadow. I arrived at Lena's place by mid-morning. She didn't ask many questions, just pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any sentence could. "Take the guest room," she said simply, handing me a spare key. That room became my sanctuary, its plain white walls and small window offering a quiet I hadn't known in years. That first day, I didn't unpack. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, a plea to come back. Nothing came. No missed calls, no texts, just the unbroken silence of people who had gotten exactly what they asked for. That night, after Lena fell asleep, I opened my laptop and logged into every account still tethered to my name. I scrolled through the utility dashboard, electricity, water, gas. I clicked through each tab and saw my card still listed under primary payment method. It struck me then, I hadn't just supported them financially. I had been their infrastructure. Quiet, dependable, invisible. The heartbeat of a household that had pretended I was disposable. I removed my information from each system. One by one, I clicked remove, confirm. Are you sure? Yes, I was sure. For the first time in years, I was sure of something. The next 3 days were a blur of silence and relief. Lena offered space, not pressure. She brewed coffee in the mornings and left the TV off in the evenings. We spoke when we wanted to, not out of obligation. I went to work like always, greeted patients, processed claims, smiled when needed. No one at the clinic knew what had happened, and that felt like power. Then, on the 4th evening, as Lena and I shared takeout on the couch, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but the text, that was unmistakable. "Power's out. Dad's losing it." It was from Noah. A few seconds later, another message came through, this time from Mom. "Rachel, the internet's down. The TV won't turn on. What's going on?" I stared at the screen, not with guilt, not with hesitation, with a strange, hollow clarity. They were finally beginning to feel the consequences of cutting me loose. I didn't respond. The following day brought 3 missed calls from Mom. Then one voicemail, her voice tired and tense. "Rachel, I don't understand. The utilities haven't been paid. Your father he's very upset. Please call me back." I didn't. The next morning she tried again. "Rachel, please. We can't watch TV. There's no hot water. The food in the fridge is spoiling." It would have been easy to feel bad. But I didn't. Because the truth is, they didn't ask me to stay out of love. They never saw me. Not really. I had been a fixture in that house, like a lamp that was only noticed when the bulb burned out. I finally replied with just one message. "Who do you think was paying for all of that the last 4 years?" No response came. just silence. But silence was never the end of anything in my family. It was always the beginning of something worse. The next wave came through a bank alert, a notification about a suspicious login attempt, then another, then a password reset request. My heart dropped. I logged in immediately. 3 failed attempts from a device I didn't recognize, then a request to change the login credentials. I didn't need to guess who it was. I called Noah. "Did Dad say anything weird lately?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Then, "He's been carrying around Mom's old notebook. The one where she used to write down all the passwords. He keeps muttering about needing to reclaim what's his. I think he's trying to get into your accounts." I clenched my jaw. "Thanks for telling me. Keep your phone close, okay?" "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I wasn't. But I would be. That night, I changed every password. I enabled every layer of security I could. 2-step verification, biometric locks, encrypted backups. I scrubbed my digital presence like I was preparing for a war. Because in many ways, I was. The next day, the phone buzzed again. Another text from Noah. He punched the fuse box. The microwave's dead. Mom's using candles. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That evening, as Lena and I were watching a documentary, a knock shattered the calm. Not just a knock, a pounding. She looked at me confused. "Are you expecting someone?" I shook my head, already moving toward the door. My heart was a drum in my chest. I checked the peephole. It was him, my father. Outside Lena's apartment, fists clenched, voice rising. "Rachel, open this door. You think you can cut us off and walk away? You owe us." Lena stood frozen. "Call the police," she whispered. I already was. When the dispatcher asked the nature of the emergency, I didn't hesitate. "My father is outside my friend's apartment. He's screaming, threatening, trying to break in." Within minutes, red and blue lights filled the street. Officers approached, speaking firmly. "Sir, you need to leave. You're causing a public disturbance." "I just want to talk to my daughter," he shouted. "Not like this," the officer said. "You've been reported for threatening behavior." He didn't move. "She owes us. Everything she has, we built." The words hit me harder than I expected. Everything I had, I built alone. With overtime shifts and skipped meals and quiet tears cried in a locked bedroom. Still, I stood behind the door, unseen. "I want to press charges if he doesn't leave," I told the dispatcher. They warned him. Again. He didn't listen, so they detained him. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he turned and looked straight at the door. "You'll regret this, Rachel." But I didn't. Not for 1 second. Because that moment wasn't just about boundaries. It was about reclaiming my life, my peace, my self-worth. And nothing he could say or scream would ever change that. Lena shut the door after the police left. She turned to me, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" I nodded. For the first time, I think I am. If you've been through anything like this, if you've ever had to choose peace over family dysfunction, then you know how powerful that first breath of freedom can be. But this was far from over. My father wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat, and in part 3, things would only get darker, messier, and far more personal. Stay tuned, because this story is just beginning. For days after the police took my father away, I didn't sleep properly. Not because I was afraid he'd come back immediately, although that thought lingered every time a car slowed down outside Lena's apartment, but because I couldn't believe how far things had spiraled. I had always known that walking away wouldn't be easy, but I hadn't anticipated the unraveling. My father's fury wasn't just a flare-up. It was an earthquake, one that cracked open every illusion I had ever held about our family. In the silence that followed his arrest, I tried to rebuild a sense of routine. I went to work. I helped Lena water her houseplants. I made lists of apartments and job options. I reminded myself daily that I had done the right thing. But the truth is, doing the right thing doesn't always feel right. Sometimes it just feels like surviving one more day without falling apart. It was midweek when I finally reached out to Nora, the other coworker who had offered me a place months earlier when she overheard me talking about unstable family dynamics. I had brushed her offer off at the time, too ashamed to accept help. But now, everything had changed. She didn't hesitate. "Come by any time," she said. "There's a spare room and it's yours for as long as you need." Lena helped me move out that weekend. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye, just boxes, hugs, and a long, silent moment where we looked at each other and understood something unspoken. I was starting a new chapter, but the trauma of the last one hadn't ended. Nora's apartment was farther from my old neighborhood, near a quiet corner of Portland with wide sidewalks, a grocery store that smelled of fresh bread, and a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. Her place wasn't big, but it was warm, filled with books, sunlight, and a cat named Dobby, who liked to curl up on my suitcase as if keeping me grounded. For the first time in years, I had a door I could lock without fearing who might knock. But peace is fragile. It took only 3 days for the next breach. I was finishing a late shift at the clinic when I received another alert from my bank. Suspicious login attempt detected? Then another. Then a request to reset my password. My chest tightened. I hadn't clicked anything. I hadn't shared anything. But someone somewhere was trying to get in again. I checked the logs. The IP address wasn't one I recognized. The time matched exactly when I'd been out of the house, which meant someone was probing my accounts, hoping I wouldn't notice. I didn't have to guess. I already knew. That night I called Noah. He answered on the third ring. "I was about to call you." "Why?" I asked, already bracing. "Dad's been different," he whispered. "Worse. He found Mom's old password notebook and he's been digging through it. He keeps yelling that you left with what belongs to the family." I closed my eyes. Has he said anything specific? He said he's going to get back what's his. He's angry, obsessed. "Thanks for telling me," I said quietly. "Please be careful." "I always am," he replied, and for a moment I felt the crushing guilt of leaving him behind, even though I knew I hadn't had a choice. After we hung up, I spent hours fortifying every digital wall I had. I reset every password, even the ones that didn't matter. I enabled two-factor authentication on all my devices, connected my accounts to a separate backup email, and added facial recognition to anything that would accept it. I even installed a password manager and encrypted my documents. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Because people like my father didn't let go, they broke things trying to hold on. The next week passed quietly, almost deceptively so. I started to believe, briefly, that maybe the arrest had shaken something loose in him, that maybe he'd finally step back and realize I wasn't coming back. Then Noah texted again. "Internet's down. Dad's furious. He tried kicking the router." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence was my answer. Another day passed, then another. Then I got a phone call, this time from a private number. I answered without thinking. It was my mother. Her voice trembled, the background filled with shouting. "Rachel," she said, like my name had weight, like it was something sacred now. "I don't know what's happening. Everything's falling apart. Your father, he's not the same. We can't access anything. The TV doesn't work. The gas is off. The fridge." I interrupted her. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you were the one who always took care of these things." "No," I said sharply. "I was the one who was used." She fell silent. "You sat there and watched him kick me out," I continued. "You stayed quiet while he erased me from that house. And now that the lights are off and the bills are due, suddenly I matter again?" "You don't understand," she whispered. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You want the comfort of my labor without the inconvenience of my presence." Then I hung up. I sat on the edge of Nora's couch, breathing heavily. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, stunned by how predictable it had all been. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. Another attempt on my bank, another alert. They weren't going to stop. Not because they needed me, but because they believed they owned me. I activated fraud protection, reported the attempts, and filed a formal complaint. I made a record of every login attempt, every message, every call, because this wasn't just about protecting my money anymore. It was about protecting my peace. But what I didn't realize then was that this wasn't even the worst of it, because the next time they tried to take something, it wouldn't be digital. It would be something real, something tangible, something I had trusted would be safe even now, something I couldn't replace. And that was when I knew the war wasn't over. It had only just begun. I had thought I was done with being shocked by them. I had accepted that being kicked out on Christmas Eve wasn't a moment of fury, but a cold, deliberate decision. I had accepted that my silence didn't protect me, and my boundaries didn't matter to people who only saw me for what I gave, not who I was. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It started on a gray morning, the kind that pressed against your chest like a weight. I was sipping coffee at Nora's kitchen table when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Noah, just 3 words. "Your car's gone." I didn't understand. "My car's here," I typed back. "I haven't moved it." The reply came quickly. Number, "It's here. At the house." My fingers froze on the keyboard. My heart felt like it missed a beat. I hadn't left my car at Nora's. I had left it parked near Lena's when I first moved out, tucked behind her building, with the keys locked inside a small safe box. I hadn't touched it in weeks because I was still sorting out registration and insurance before selling it. I called Noah. He answered immediately. "I swear I saw it. Same plates, same scratch on the rear bumper, and there's stuff in it. Mom's coffee mug, some grocery bags." I was already grabbing my coat. "Text me if they leave again. I'm coming over." As I pulled onto the old street I once called home, I saw it. Parked right in front of the cracked white fence. My navy Corolla, the one I paid for over years of skipped lunches and holiday shifts, sitting like it belonged to them. I got out and walked up to the car. It was unlocked. Inside, the seat was reclined, a blanket crumpled on the passenger side. There was a grocery receipt in the console, dated 2 days ago, paid for in cash. The name at the top, my mother's. I knocked on the front door, my breath shallow. She answered like she was expecting me. "Rachel," she said tight-lipped, "what are you doing here?" "You stole my car." She blinked. "Don't be dramatic." "You took it without asking. You used it without permission. That's theft." "It was just sitting there," she said, brushing invisible dust off her sweater. "You weren't using it." "That doesn't make it yours." She stepped aside, letting me in with a huff. "Don't do this. We needed it. Your father's been trying to find work." "And he needed to sleep in the back seat to do that?" I snapped. She flinched but didn't answer. My eyes scanned the living room. It was as cold and hollow as I remembered. The same worn couch. The same silence. Then something else caught my attention. The shelf where I'd kept my old laptop, a silver MacBook I'd used for school and work, was empty. I turned slowly. "Where's my laptop?" She froze. "You sold it, didn't you?" She didn't answer. "For how much?" I pressed. "How much did you trade away years of my files, my writing, my documents for?" "I needed the money," she whispered. "You always need the money," I said, "and it's always mine you take." She sank onto the couch. "We're behind on everything. Rent, water, your father. He's not thinking straight." "And you thought I wouldn't notice? That it didn't matter? You don't live here anymore," she said bitterly. "You left. You abandoned us." I laughed. It was sharp, joyless. "You kicked me out. You made it very clear this wasn't my home." She stared at the floor. I took out my phone. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling the police," I said. "The car, the laptop, this is theft." "You're really going to do this to your own mother?" "You already did this to your own daughter," I said. Noah came down the stairs quietly as I was finishing the call. He looked at me, not surprised, just tired. "Is it true?" I asked him gently. "Did they take the car?" He nodded. "They made a copy of the spare key before you left." "I didn't know." The officer who arrived was calm, almost apologetic as he took the report. I showed him the receipts, the title of the car, the proof of purchase for the laptop. He nodded, asked a few quiet questions, then turned to my mother. "Ma'am, do you have a bill of sale for the laptop? Any record that it belonged to you?" She didn't. "Until we sort this out," the officer said to me, "you can file a civil theft report. We'll make a note." I handed her a copy of the restraining order petition I had printed days before. "If I get one more message, one more login attempt, if you take anything else, this becomes official." She didn't say anything. As I walked out of the house, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter had already closed. Later that night, back at Nora's, I sat at my new desk, one I had built with my own hands, and opened a new laptop. Blank desktop, clean files, a new beginning. I uploaded what little I had saved from old backups. Most of it was gone. Years of writing, letters I never sent, budget spreadsheets, notes from my childhood journals, all wiped out in an instant because my mother needed to buy medicine for a man who never saw me as more than a convenience. Nora brought me tea. She didn't ask questions. She just sat beside me and let me exhale. "I keep thinking," I said quietly, "maybe this time is the last." But they always find a new way to cross the line. She nodded. "But you keep finding new ways to push back." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel brave. It just feels necessary." A few days passed. Then another message. This time from an unknown number. "You think you've won?" It was followed by silence. No name, no context, but I knew exactly who it was from. I opened the county records website and searched the jail database. The word struck me like a punch to the gut. Released on bail. I called Noah. "It was Uncle Mark," he said. "He came by yesterday with an envelope." Mom looked nervous. I remembered Mark, the man who hosted wild barbecues that ended in yelling matches and police sirens. Dad's old drinking buddy. If he had bailed him out, this wasn't mercy. It was alliance. "Dad's saying things again," Noah added. "He said he's going to make you feel what it's like to be pushed out." My grip on the phone tightened. It wasn't over. It was about to get worse. And I needed to be ready. Not just to protect myself, but to protect the one person still trapped inside the walls I had escaped. Noah. And I wasn't going to let them take him too. It happened on an ordinary September morning, the kind where the air begins to shift, carrying with it the scent of dying leaves and the promise of change. I was sitting at my desk sipping lukewarm coffee, sorting through emails when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Noah, just 3 words. "Sis, I'm ready." I stared at it for a few seconds, not breathing, not blinking. There were so many things he could have meant, but I knew. I knew because we had spoken about it only in glances, in silences, in passing messages disguised as jokes. For the last year, I had waited for this moment, not impatiently, but with quiet anticipation. And now, the words were here. I texted back immediately. "Tomorrow morning, be ready at 8. "No one will be up," he replied. "They sleep in late now." And so I went to bed that night with an ache in my chest, not from fear or uncertainty, but from the fragile hope that tomorrow something would begin to heal. When I pulled up in front of the old house, it looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing. Maybe it was the overgrown lawn or the peeling paint on the shutters, or maybe it was because I was no longer afraid of it. Noah stood on the porch, wearing his old green hoodie, the straps of a black backpack clutched tightly in one hand. His hair was longer, his eyes more tired than a boy his age should ever look. But when he saw me, he smiled. And it wasn't the hollow smile he used to give to avoid conflict. It was real, whole, cautious but free. "You didn't bring much," I said as I loaded his bag into the trunk. He shrugged. "The rest isn't worth taking." Inside the car, we didn't speak for a few minutes, just the sound of the engine and the morning air moving through the cracked window. Finally, I asked, "Did they say anything?" "They didn't notice," he said. "They were both asleep." Dad stayed out late. Mom didn't ask questions. We drove in silence for a while before he turned to me. "I didn't want to leave before I was ready," he said. "I didn't want them to say I gave up halfway." "I know," I replied. "You did it your way. That matters." We arrived at the community college campus just before noon. It was the same place I had studied years ago, the same path I'd taken when I first thought I could build a different life. It felt strange walking those halls again, this time not as a girl searching for escape, but as a sister returning with something precious. I had already helped him enroll over the summer, quietly setting things in motion. Documents, ID cards, a payment plan under my name. We carried his bag into the dorm. It was small, but clean. 2 twin beds, a shared desk, a narrow closet. His roommate hadn't arrived yet, so, for now, the room was his alone. He dropped his bag on the floor and walked to the window, staring out at the courtyard where a few other students sat laughing, tossing a frisbee between them. "I can't believe I'm actually here," he said. "You're not just here," I replied. "You're free." We spent the rest of the afternoon setting things up. I helped him make the bed, hung a small cork board on the wall, placed a few books on the shelf. Then we walked to a nearby noodle shop, a place I used to visit between lectures when my only escape from home was a textbook and a bowl of broth. Across from me, Noah slurped his noodles with a look of disbelief. "This is the first meal I've had without someone yelling in the background," he said quietly. I didn't respond. My throat was tight, but he looked up and smiled. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're safe now. That's all I ever wanted." Later that evening, I dropped him back at the dorm and stood in the doorway a little too long, unsure if I should hug him or wave or say something profound. He made the decision for me. He stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Maybe I'll even make you proud." "You already have," I whispered. Driving home, I let myself cry for the first time in months. Not out of sadness, but from a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. I wasn't alone anymore. I had done what no one had done for me. I had helped someone leave that house whole. The weeks that followed were quiet in the best way. Noah called often, sometimes to brag about a good grade, sometimes to vent about a professor who loved pop quizzes. Other times, he just called to say he was okay. I lived for those calls. His voice was changing. It was lighter, unburdened. It was like watching someone rise from deep water, coughing but breathing, blinking in the light. As for our parents, the last I heard came through a distant relative who still lived in Portland. The house had been taken back by the landlord after months of unpaid rent. They had moved into a rundown apartment on the east side of the city, known more for its broken streetlights than its safety. They sent a letter once. Just one. It came in a torn envelope forwarded from Nora's place by someone who didn't even spell my name correctly. Inside, the handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. It was short, blame-filled, half accusation, half plea. There was no apology, just a long list of what I had taken and what they had sacrificed. I didn't reply, because I had nothing left to give. I had spent too long offering pieces of myself in exchange for moments of peace that never came. Now, every second I didn't spend worrying about them felt like a breath I had earned. Noah was thriving. I was building. We were healing. Not because time had passed, but because we had chosen every day to live differently. One afternoon, we met by the river after one of his classes. The wind played with our hair, and the sky was painted in oranges and soft blues. He leaned back against the bench and looked at me. "You know what I realized?" he said. "What?" "That we never really had a family. We just had a house full of people trying not to drown." I nodded. "And now?" He smiled. "Now we're swimming." We sat there in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything that needed to be said was already known. 2 kids who had once believed that love meant endurance now knew better. Love wasn't staying in the fire to prove your loyalty. Love was pulling someone out of it, even if you had to carry them while your own feet burned. And that day, by the river, with the wind against our skin and freedom in our lungs, I realized we weren't running anymore. We were walking forward, together. I always believed that once I got out, once Noah was safe, the rest would fall into place. That was the narrative I clung to on the darkest nights, an ending where healing was immediate and permanent, where the past stayed where it belonged. But healing isn't a destination. It's a road you walk barefoot, often bleeding, retracing steps that once broke you just to remind yourself that now, they don't. After Noah moved into his dorm, I made my own transition. I found a small apartment not far from the clinic where I worked, tucked above a flower shop with windows that caught the morning light. It was quiet, clean, and more importantly, mine. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece, never rushing. Each lamp, each cushion, each fork was a choice, and after years of living in a house where I had no control, choice itself was a kind of luxury. Nora helped me sign the lease. She smiled when I turned the key for the first time and whispered, "Welcome home." It hit me harder than expected. No one had said those words to me in years, not when I returned from work, not even when I brought home groceries, not even on Christmas Eve. I changed my phone number, canceled every account still tied to my old address, filed the restraining order paperwork, and dropped it off with trembling hands. It wasn't about punishment, it was protection. It was the final lock on a door that had never led me anywhere but into pain. They tried once more. The message came from a different number, unsigned, but I knew the cadence of the threat too well to pretend it could be anyone else. You can run, but you can't hide forever. Family is forever. I stared at the words and felt nothing. Not rage, not fear, just exhaustion. I took a screenshot and attached it to the police report I had already filed. This time I added a note. I am being harassed by the man who used to be my father. I do not feel safe. The police followed up with a warning notice. They couldn't arrest him without further action, but it was another mark on his record, another reminder that he no longer had unrestricted access to my life. I installed a security system, cameras at the front door, window alarms, a doorbell with a recording feature, not because I believed he'd come, but because if he did, I'd be ready. Prepared, not paranoid. I slept differently in that new apartment. At first, I'd wake at every creak, expecting footsteps, the familiar cold dread of someone banging on the door. But eventually my body learned. It uncoiled. It believed the lock would hold. And slowly I did too. Noah came by on weekends. We cooked together, laughed over stupid movies, spent hours playing old board games we used to sneak into our room as kids. He brought his laundry sometimes, but mostly he brought stories about professors who quoted TikTok, roommates who stole cereal, and girls who smiled at him in the library. He was becoming someone I'd never had the chance to be at his age, free, curious, unafraid. One day, while we were organizing books on my new shelf, he paused over an old family photo I hadn't realized was still tucked into a folder. It was the four of us, taken years ago at a pumpkin patch. My mother's hand on my shoulder, my father smiling stiffly at the camera, Noah in a red hoodie. I was maybe 15. He looked at it for a long time before setting it face down. "Do you think they were ever good people?" he asked quietly. I thought about it. "I think they were people who had chances," I said, "and they chose not to grow." He nodded. That was enough. The truth is, I will always carry echoes of that house. I still double-check that my doors are locked. I still freeze when I hear yelling in another apartment, but I no longer let those echoes dictate my steps. I walk forward now, not away from something, but toward everything I once thought I couldn't have. There are things I miss, things I wish we had. I wish I had a mother who stood up instead of standing by, a father who led with love instead of control, a family that celebrated presence over performance. But I don't live in wishes anymore. I live in choices, and I choose peace. It took nearly 2 years before we heard anything new about them. A distant cousin forwarded me an email out of obligation. My parents had been evicted again, this time from a tiny apartment in a high-crime neighborhood. My father had lost 3 jobs in as many months. My mother now worked part-time at a dollar store. The email was full of bitterness, blame. They said I had abandoned them, that I had turned Noah against them, that everything wrong in their lives was because I refused to come home. I didn't reply, because I knew better. I hadn't turned Noah against them. They had done that themselves. I hadn't abandoned them. I had finally chosen myself, and I hadn't destroyed the family. I had simply stopped pretending there ever was one. On a golden October afternoon, Noah and I walked along the river, the path scattered with crisp leaves. He looked lighter than I'd ever seen him. He had just submitted his transfer application to a university out of state. He wanted to study psychology, something about understanding the human mind after surviving so many years around people who broke his. "I'm not scared anymore," he said suddenly, watching the water move. "Of them." He nodded. "Of ending up like them. I used to think it was inevitable. That anger just lived in our blood. And now? I know better. Because I had you." I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. He smiled. "I get to choose who I become. That's the part they never understood. They thought control meant safety. But it just meant silence." I took his hand and held it as the sun dipped behind the trees. "I'm proud of you," I said. "More than you know." He leaned his head against my shoulder, and we stayed like that for a while, just two siblings who had walked through fire and come out not untouched, but alive. We didn't need a traditional family. We didn't need matching sweaters or holiday cards. We needed safety. We needed truth. We needed each other. And we had that. Still do. Still will. Because family isn't who you're born to. It's who walks with you when everything else falls apart. And we were walking. Forward. Always. Together. From the moment Rachel was cast out of her family's home on Christmas Eve, the story that unfolded wasn't just about a young woman reclaiming her independence. It was about the quiet, powerful act of breaking free from emotional captivity. What began with a dinner table confrontation turned into a years-long journey of escape, boundaries, loss, rediscovery, and ultimately healing. She wasn't just forced out of her house. She was liberated from a legacy of silence. Through each painful decision, Rachel peeled away the illusions that had defined her life. The idea that family must be endured no matter how much it breaks you, that sacrifice equates to love, and that enduring emotional abuse is somehow noble. In place of those beliefs, she built something new. Not instantly, not perfectly, but deliberately. Her apartment wasn't just four walls and a lease. It was a declaration of autonomy. Every password reset, every security measure, every canceled utility was a line drawn in permanent ink. I will no longer be your lifeline. The people who should have protected her, her father, who used his title as a weapon, and her mother, whose silence echoed as loudly as his rage, didn't just fail her. They used her. They depended on her while diminishing her, relied on her strength while dismissing her worth. And when she walked away, their world crumbled. Not because she sabotaged it, but because it had always been propped up by her invisible labor. When she stopped giving, they had nothing to stand on. But Rachel's story is not just one of rebellion, it's one of love, the kind forged not in blood, but in loyalty, resilience, and quiet promises. Her bond with Noah reminded us all that even in the darkest places, even under the heaviest weight, something good can survive. That sometimes the greatest act of love is to look someone in the eyes and say, "I'll come back for you when you're ready." And she did. She kept her promise. When Noah turned 18, when he whispered, "I'm ready," she showed up. No parade, no cameras, just a sister at the curb, engine running, trunk open. She helped him pack his pain into a backpack, helped him walk away with dignity, not desperation. And in doing so, they proved something simple yet profound. You don't have to inherit your suffering. You can say no. You can walk away. You can build something new. For all of us watching, Rachel's journey holds a mirror up to our own. Many of us were taught that family means forever, that no matter what, you stay, you serve, you forgive. But what if that idea traps us more than it protects us? What if it teaches us to bleed quietly instead of demanding better? The lesson in Rachel's story is not to abandon those we love at the first sign of struggle. It's not about cutting ties out of convenience. It's about recognizing the difference between helping and enabling, between loyalty and martyrdom. She didn't walk away because she was weak. She walked away because she was finally strong enough to understand that being used isn't the same as being loved. And what she built afterward, her apartment, her peace, her relationship with Noah, wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the hard-earned beginning of something more honest, more grounded, something she owned. Every plate she set on her own table, every bill she paid with her name alone, was a quiet rebellion against the lie that she was nothing without them. So what can we take from all of this? It's this. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to demand peace. You are allowed to leave places, people, and patterns that hurt you, even if they're dressed as family. Your worth is not measured by how much pain you can endure, but by how boldly you protect your peace, your future, your life. Now let's take a moment to reflect. If you were in Rachel's shoes and you had to choose between two options, A, staying and continuing to support your family financially, even though they emotionally neglected and disrespected you, or B, walking away, even if it meant starting over with almost nothing but your dignity intact. What would you choose? Comment below with your answer, A or B. Let us know why you made that choice. Don't just vote, share your perspective. Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone. And as we continue Rachel and Noah's journey, we invite you to join this conversation. What are your thoughts? Have you ever had to walk away from something toxic, even if it looked like love on the surface? How did you find your strength? Comment below and share your insight. Let's make this a space where healing feels possible. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think a little differently about your own life, consider subscribing to this channel. Your support keeps these stories alive and gives us the motivation to keep creating more content that truly matters. Because somewhere out there, another Rachel is packing her suitcase. And maybe, just maybe, she needs to know she's not alone.